Welcome, folks. Our staff is working hard to keep you alive longer and healthier. And, you know, I have a little plaque. I told my secretary about the French statement, and she wrote it out, and it has a little plaque, and I've got it on my desk.
What does it say?
Soyez tranquille, which means stay loose,
tranquil.
chill out.
I got the tranquil part of it.
You got soyez tranquille. So anyhow, I look at that and you say, chill out, baby. But anyhow, that's the message today. If you really want to live longer, chill. Chill. Take it cool. Well, we'll talk about that later on, but here's something that'll keep you from chilling. You know, Terry, years ago, I was involved in Zaire, and I was in Zaire during the Ebola outbreak. I was there.
That was a frightening time.
Well, I wasn't frightened, but anyhow, people were frightened, and there were people outbreak in a place called Kikwik. We were in Kinshasa, and I was getting medical supplies, putting them in airplanes and sending them to the people in Kikwik. But it was not a big deal worldwide. This particular outbreak, because of the way it's come out in Sierra Leone, in Liberia, in Guinea, and then before long, the Ivory Coast, Nigeria, and so forth, that West African area is so tightly packed, and the numbers of people dying from Ebola is just shocking. And now we've had one in the U.S. Yeah. Now, according to an expert, the international community has, quote, failed miserably to stop the Ebola virus. Now, that's the dire warning from the president of the World Bank, as nations everywhere are scrambling to prevent what could be a global pandemic.
The United States is stepping up its efforts to stop the deadly virus, while both Republicans and Democrats in Congress are demanding to know more about the Obama administration's plans to fight Ebola. Charlene Aaron has that story.
The first victim to die of Ebola in the United States was remembered during a memorial in Dallas Wednesday night. Thomas Eric Duncan's death has health officials here on high alert as they try to prevent the spread of the deadly virus in the U.S.
Officials are monitoring the situation in Dallas, where Duncan was visiting family, and are keeping a close eye on anyone who came in contact with him.
A sheriff's deputy who went to Duncan's apartment is being kept in isolation after coming down with flu-like symptoms. His family is taking a wait-and-see approach.
We're very kind of scared, just want to make sure everything's okay. And just, waiting to get all the facts out and making sure nothing gets blown out of proportion, but we are just waiting to see.
While we are being told the risk is minimal, overabundance of caution, we're taking several actions to make sure that the public health, safety, and welfare is protected.
Meanwhile, Ebola screenings are being put in place at key U.S. airports. Travelers arriving from West Africa will have their temperatures taken as a precaution.
What we're doing is putting in additional protection. We've been very clear that as long as Ebola continues to spread in Africa, we can't make the risk zero here.
President Obama says the new efforts provide an extra layer of protection on top of procedures already in place at several airports. But the focus is still on stopping the epidemic in West Africa. White House officials say the procedures will allow the U.S. to isolate, evaluate, and monitor travelers.
These 5 airports, as you may know, are the destination of 94% of individuals who travel to the United States from the 3 countries that are currently affected by Ebola right now. So the vast majority of passengers from those countries would be subject to this additional layer of screening.
But some in Congress, both Democrats and Republicans, question what the Obama administration plans are for tackling the crisis. According to The Hill, Republican Senator David Vitter is urging colleagues to block any additional funding to combat the deadly virus until the president is more clear about his plans to stop the outbreak. Vitter also suggests the administration bar foreign nationals from countries dealing with Ebola from entering the U.S. Several other lawmakers are also calling for additional details be provided to Congress. Charlene Aaron, CBN News.
Thanks, Charlene. The word is that the nurse in Spain who contracted Ebola had the hazmat material on, but touched the outside of her garment and then somehow touched her face. That's all it was. That's all it takes. One drop of that stuff and you can catch it, so we can have a pandemic. But something else that we've been telling you about on this program, they've let all these children in from Central America. They're all over the place, and certainly in the southwest part of our country, but they're coming into other cities. And there's been a major outbreak of this enterovirus. And where does it come from? Well, some people are saying, I've said it, and I believe others have, these little children, have this stuff. And their immune systems maybe don't react quite as strongly to it as the ones who are not used to it, but you don't build up an immunity. So if somebody has this material, it doesn't take, all they got to do is shake their hand, they blow their nose, they touch food, they eat, and the utensils aren't washed carefully, et cetera, and you can get it. And so people are getting this intestinal virus. And it seems to me, and there are now some backup on that those little immigrants are bringing this to us. And, I want to, we work in these Central American countries to get people healed, and I'm all for it. We've got anti-parasite medicine and other things we give out, and we want to help them. But to bring them here without necessary medical attention and without the procedures to get rid of these viruses, it's going to be serious. And some of these of our children who get enterovirus might well die or be paralyzed. Well, as we've told you, we've got a team of Operation Blessing working in Liberia, particularly to supply the much-needed chlorine, which is used to kill these viruses. And we're working with local churches to stop the spread of that disease in that country. John Jessup has this story from our CBN News Bureau in Washington. Here's John.
Thanks, Pat. Volunteers trained and equipped by Operation Blessing are distributing sanitation equipment in Liberia. They're also delivering desperately needed food to quarantine victims cut off from society. George Thomas brings us that story from Monrovia.
Spend time with Allison Dole, and soon
let us pray. Father, in the name of Jesus, we want to thank you today.
you hear the cry of a Liberian pastor, determined to bring hope to his community and country gripped with fear.
We've come to share the love of Jesus with you and say that Ebola is real.
On Tuesday morning, Pastor Dole, along with dozens of church members and volunteers from Operation Blessing, canvassed a village south of Liberia's capital city.
Operation Blessing International, who have come to identify with the Liberians in their own way, to say Jesus loves us and we all can fight Ebola together.
Carrying buckets and supplies to make chlorine water. The key to fighting this deadly disease, awareness and prevention. Operation Blessing is partnering with numerous local churches, especially in the small towns and villages of Liberia. Today they're handing out buckets with the message, stay safe from Ebola. They drop in a few drops of chlorine, fill it up with water, and then they distribute these.
We are giving you a bucket so that your customers, as they come to eat bread and whatever, will wash their hands before they are served, so to prevent them from the virus.
Pastor Dole's church is in this village. He says the majority of folks living here are poor and cannot afford the basic yet critical supplies.
I'm happy because I got a bucket to prevent the disease.
Around the corner from the village,
people with Ebola, people suspected to have Ebola, are stigmatized by their friends, by their neighbors. There's so much fear. No one wants to be around them.
Another team led by Operation Blessing's David Darg.
You got the oil? Yeah. Okay, let's go.
Is bringing sacks of rice, oil, flour, sugar, and other supplies to families in quarantine.
Because they're not able to go out and get supplies, and no one's brave enough to bring them the supplies. Their friends and neighbors don't want to go near them. We can't take it to the house, so we're going to leave it on the step here for them.
Exercising caution.
Thank you for your generosity.
Of course, brother.
We are in appreciation.
Yeah, we understand.
Highly appreciated and knowledgeable of your generosity.
This man's daughter and her ex-husband died last week from Ebola.
Thank you.
So you're not alone. We're here with you.
We're never alone. We got Jesus with us.
Amen.
Yeah.
Amen.
Keeping some distance away, CBN News talked to his grandchildren, 15 and 6, orphaned by Ebola.
Now to be taking of all, just to stay home and ask God to grant me a successful life.
You miss your mom? Yeah. I'm so sorry. This is the sad reality of life in the Ebola hot zone, an invisible enemy that continues to claim lives and bring untold heartache for thousands of families. For aid groups like Operation Blessing, it's all about prevention, awareness, and helping those caught in Ebola's deadly strain. George Thomas, CBN News, Monrovia, Liberia.
Pat, Operation Blessing and CBN partners being the hands and feet of Jesus.
There's no question about it. Ladies and gentlemen, we're there. You remember I told you that if you participate in what we do here at CBN, you'll be on the front line of helping people where they're hurting. And there's a tremendous amount of hurt going on in Liberia right now, and we've got people on the scene. They're bringing flour and rice and sugar and other necessities. They're bringing blankets and things that people need because the families are cut off. It's terrible. Nobody wants to have anything to do with them. They don't want to touch them. They're like lepers in a leper colony, and we're there to help them. And so David Dogg's out there. You saw what he's doing on the scene. And George Thomas is there reporting. So if you want to help, and you really should, this is an emergency in those countries. I think Sierra Leone, in Guinea, and Liberia, and I'm sure the Ivory Coast and those other countries will be affected because any travel back and forth. There's still an enormous amount of superstition involving this disease. And as I say, I was down in Zaire. The name comes from the Ebola River in Zaire. And it was a little village down there, and they didn't name it after the village. And there was a river. There wasn't even the closest one, but people who were naming it said, well, let's call it Ebola. So we call it Ebola because of the Ebola River in Zaire. But it's hemorrhagic fever, and Marford is another name. And there's a book called The Hot Zone that talks about what will happen if somebody vomits on you. I mean, you're asking for infection by the thousands. So hopefully it can be contained. But fear not, God's with you, and we're here to help. So pick up the telephone, call in. And this is the emergency for Ebola sufferers in Liberia. And it's Operation Blessing Disaster Relief Fund. And those folks like David Darg and others will be delivering the food and the medicine and the supplies. We're also bringing in cartons and cartons of the hazmat material because when they treat an Ebola patient, they burn the stuff. They burn the bedding and burn the clothes, and so they have to replace them. They don't wash them because you don't get that stuff out, but we're burning it. So we're here to help. Pick up the phone, call in, say you can count on me. Here's John.
Pat, as you mentioned earlier, the Centers for Disease Control is still trying to figure out why enterovirus D68 has affected so many children this year. At least 5 have died from it. Investigative reporter Cheryl Atkinson writes that some people are raising the question of whether the disease is being spread by the presence of tens of thousands of illegal immigrant children who've come to the U.S. in the past year. She points out the origin could be entirely unrelated, but that a study published in Virology Journal found the virus among more than 3,000 young people in 8 Latin American countries last year. She also notes there are significant numbers of illegal immigrant children in both cities where the current outbreak was first identified, Kansas City, Missouri, and Chicago. You can find a link to her story on cbnnews.com. Well, the airstrikes against ISIS might be slowing down the Islamic terrorist group, but U.S. military leaders say they won't stop them from capturing the Syrian border town of Kobani. ISIS reportedly has seized more than a third of the town. The Pentagon press secretary says airstrikes aren't enough and competent ground forces are needed to successfully retake the territory. The Obama administration insisted again that ground forces will not be American.
Our strikes continue alongside our partners. It remains a difficult mission. As I've indicated from the start, this is not something that is going to be solved overnight.
But the U.S. doesn't have a strong partner on the ground in Syria, and the Pentagon says ISIS will threaten and capture other towns as well. And Pat, you mentioned the other day, these airstrikes are like pinpricks for ISIS.
There's no question. You have an elephant and you've got a mosquito. I mean, he's not going to deter the elephant. The elephant is charging. We have, ladies and gentlemen, the largest, most competent military that's ever been known in mankind. We have firepower that is absolutely awesome. The problem is we have a president. Now, the former Secretary of Defense was asked by Bill O'Reilly, does the president have the will to use the force? And the answer was, well, apparently not yet. And they not the exact words, but it's the idea. And the president he's so hung up on political correctness, so hung up on what the liberal wing of his party think, so hung up on not wanting to offend Muslims and all the rest of it, that he refuses to use the power. And sooner or later, for example, in Mosul, they say in Mosul, trying to get that city back is going to be a nightmare. It'll be exactly what the Israelis were up against with Hamas. In Gaza, they have to go into a city and take it house by house, and that means blowing up great neighborhoods, and they don't want to do that. And then, of course, ISIS will be hiding behind civilians, which is what Hamas did. They put gun emplacements in civilian areas. And then when the Israelis would bomb those areas, it would say, well, aren't you terrible? You're killing civilians. Well, the civilian areas are being used by the terrorists as bases. You're going to have the same thing. Any town they get, it's going to be virtually impossible to root them out. And it'll be done only at the cost of lives. Right now, if we put massive airstrikes on and we put forces out, the Turks, I know from experience in Korea, the Turks are incredible fighters. Incredible. They are tough and well-disciplined, and if the Erdogan will turn his people loose, but he's waiting for a partnership with us. Now, here's the deal. We are not sure that Assad is the one we need to take down, because he is an Alawite, and so the Sunnis don't like Alawites. Saddam Hussein was an Alawite. If we had not gone into Iraq to begin with, we wouldn't have had these problems right now. I know they're brutal. They were repressive, but nothing like what's happened. The Christians in Iraq had a fairly good deal, and I think the same thing is true in Syria. Now Syria is in chaos, breaking apart, and the Turks say to us, if you want us to come in, you have to at least do a no-fly zone over Damascus, but you've got to take down Assad. And you ask yourself, well, what will come in his place? Well, what will come in his place is an Islamic dictatorship, which is what they want. So we are torn in relation to this. But there are some moderate Syrian elements that we should have helped a couple of years ago. And we can still help them, but the trouble is ISIS came out of that problem. The longer the president waits, the more dangerous the world becomes. The longer he waits, the next thing you're going to wind up with is a nuke dropped into someplace around the nation's capital. And we don't want that. It will be horrible. We need to nip that thing in the bud and do it fast. But unfortunately, we've got Hamlet in the White House. To be or not to be, we don't know whether it's nobler in mind and so forth. So somebody elected him, we put him in office, and now there's a problem.
A Christian t-shirt printing company in Kentucky has been ordered to take diversity training. Hands On Originals refused to make gay pride t-shirts back in 2012 because it disagreed with the message. The gay rights organization that requested the shirts filed a complaint. The Lexington Area Human Rights Commission decided the t-shirt company discriminated against the gay group. Critics say it's just another example of government preferring gay rights over freedom and religion of speech. The blockbuster Christian animation series called VeggieTales has won a Dove Award. VeggieTales' 25 Favorite Bible Songs won the award for Children's Music Album of the Year. The actor behind Larry the Cucumber accepted the Dove Award this week at the Gospel Music Association Awards ceremony in Nashville. In his acceptance speech, Mike Nawrocki said He looks forward to many more years of reminding kids that God made you special and he loves you very much. Congratulations to him. Well, you can always get the latest from CBN News by going to our website at cbnnews.com.